starting with concentration and tracking, focusing on an object. Actually, can you hand me that baby right there? Because we'll use this as our naked baby. I don't know why he's naked. We just have no clothes for him. So focusing on an object is really just that. So something that's going to intrigue the child, so either having like vibrant colors on it, or something that's interesting to the child, or like a rattle that has a sound. This one's kind of almost too loud. But we're not being like tricky with them or anything. It's just literally holding something in their line of sight. So you want to like catch like wherever their natural line of sight would be, and just put it in front of them and see if they can, if that will hold their attention. So are they seeing it? Can you tell they're seeing it? And then what indicators do you see that they're interested in it? So do you need to make a sound to make them more intrigued? Do you need to move it around if it doesn't make a sound? If you do make movements, make sure that they're very small movements where you're not requiring they track, but they're just in the line of sight. And then if an infant does reach out and try to grasp the object, this brings us back to practical life. We're not expecting they grasp the object. This would be a very, very young infant. I mean, you guys get infants as young as 6 weeks sometimes where they're not able to reach out and grasp yet. No. So this is where we're literally just holding the object to where they can explore it and look at it. And then if they do reach out and grasp it, then you'll let them, like, oh, what is that? And then let them explore it on their own. If they're interested, they might take it to their mouth. They might just fling it down and instantly drop it. Yeah. If they do, then pick it back up and just gently place it back in their line of sight. So that would be an activity for a child 0 to 3 months old. And that's really depending on their development. They move beyond that pretty quickly where they're actually starting to reach out and grasp things. But it's just getting them interested in looking at things. And then another one which you guys do in your classroom, I have some examples somewhere. Just some pattern sheets. Yeah. And so these are really great to place on the wall near a resting area for them. So if you have a padded area in the room, or even next to a mirror where a child can lay down and look at things.
Yeah, we have ours on the mirror.
Yeah, that's a good spot for it too. And I love mirrors at this age too, because it gives them more of a vantage point of different things that they can view. Because a lot of infants won't be looking straight up. Their head will be like to one side or the other. So if they're looking into the mirror, then they can see all of the room. Yeah. Versus just having to stare at a wall. Yeah. Right beside them. But if you periodically change out pictures at their level. We start with black and white, and then we'll eventually add some color for older infants. But babies will typically see things more vibrantly in black and white in the beginning. So they need like major contrast. They don't see all of the colors yet. And so being able to just observe and view things that are near in their distance. Very young infants, well, newborns specifically, can only see about 10 inches from their face. So basically the farthest that they're going to be able to see is if a mother is nursing, they can see their mother's face. But beyond that, they're not going to be able to see a whole lot. So everything else is kind of blurred out. So that's why everything needs to be placed very close to the infant to be able to gain their attention and let them focus on something. So we're not going to be like, oh, do you see that fan on the wall over there? Yeah, they're not going to be able to see that far.
No, they wouldn't even do that. They'd just be like,
well, okay, I need something like right here that's going to catch my attention. So having pattern pages are really fun to be able to place around any of them. And then you guys use your mobiles quite a bit in the classroom, so we're going to go over this series of visual mobiles. Page too far. The very first one I did not bring with me. It's a very complicated one and it breaks very easily, so I didn't want to transport it.
I've seen it used.
But here's an example of what it looks like. So it's called the Muneri mobile. And it is a black and white mobile specifically because we are focusing on those contrasting black and whites. And it's a very free moving mobile. So just the slightest breeze is going to cause that thing to move. And what you want to do is place it about 10 to 12 inches from an infant's face. And so that's why you guys keep it held up most of the time, because unless an infant is actually actively using it, another child can come by and tear it down. So. Yeah. You have to make sure it's in an area of the classroom, like where other infants aren't going to come up and grab it, because it should be low enough that a crawling infant would be able to reach it. But of course, we don't want them to. to. So you have to strategically do that during a time where an infant young enough to use it is going to be awake and attentive, and this gives them something to start tracking. That they're focusing on a black and white object, but also there's going to be movement to it. You can't really see it super well in this picture, but there is a clear globe, and the globe actually reflects light depending on where the infant is looking and what the light coming into the room looks like. So that gives them another unique perspective of things flowing and moving and focusing. So Munari Mobile, and the recommended age range for this is actually 3 to 6 weeks, which of course all of our infants coming in are going to be 6 weeks at least. I always recommend to start with that one with them.
Yeah, that's what we did with Kellen when he first started.
Yeah, he started right at 6 weeks, didn't he? Yeah. I almost wish we could like lend it out to parents to be able to use it at home before their baby starts.
Yeah.
But that, I love the mobiles because it's completely child directed. There's really no teacher interaction with it. What the teacher needs to do is recognize when a child is ready to move on to the next mobile. So it's more of your observation of the infant. Are they interested in it? Is it engaging them? Are they starting to track? So the skills that they're acquiring, their focus and attention, is what you're observing more so than any sort of interaction that you're providing. And it also helps an infant learn how to be okay being alone, that they can be entertained, that they can discover things in their environment without needing direct teacher interaction or another child, or being held, and being comfortable not being held. So this isn't like tummy time. This is just, independent exploration of their environment. Even as young as 3 to 6 weeks, they can start doing a lot of independent, which is great because especially when you have 9 infants in your classroom, you can't constantly be engaging with every single one of them. So from a very, very early age, we're going to start the process of becoming independent.
Do they, when we tell them not to do something, can they remember not to do it? Or
as an infant, no.
Yeah,
no. Like, what about 1 to 2 or like 1 years old? Can they understand what that means?
So this kind of goes along with giving direction.
Yeah.
So typically you can give directions to the extent of their age. So 1-year-olds can receive 1-step directions, meaning that 1-year-olds should be able to understand not to do something. So an infant, you really can't give them any number of step directions and then expect them to follow through. You can give them a direction, but then you're going to be encouraging them to follow that process. And a lot of that also depends on the expectations that have been set previously. So if a child comes to us at the age of 1 and they've never been given a direction to follow, then it's going to take a lot longer for them to start following directions.
Okay.
But in general, a typically developing child should be able to follow the number of directions as they are years old.
Okay.
So a 2-year-old, for example, should be able to follow a 2-step direction. Okay. So if you're saying, go potty and wash your hands, a 2-year-old should be able to follow through with that. However, think of all the steps that they need to take in order to go potty.
Right.
So if they are proficient at using the toilet and they already understand all of those steps, then you could give them a step like go potty and wash your hands, and they should be able to remember and follow through with that. However, if like in the toddler classroom you say go wash your hands and come to the table, you might have some toddlers be able to follow through, but that is 2 separate steps.
Yes, and I've noticed that they're kind of like, wait, what? And I just felt that's like, now that makes sense. Like,
So if
or
they
like
go
they'll
over,
go to the sink and just stand there.
Yeah.
But then there's older ones like that will fall, like Clay. I know if you tell him to go wash your hands and then he'll throw away his paper towel and then go sit down. Like there's some of the older ones I've noticed and they will follow that, but the little ones are just like.
And part of that is the structure of the routine. So if it's the same directions, the same expectations from day to day, the longer they're a part of that environment, the more fluid that will become. So even though you're giving them a 2-step direction right there, maybe even 3 steps, wash your hands, throw away your paper towel, and go to the table.
I don't even ask him to do that.
It's the same every day.
It still remembers the 2. Yeah, so I'm like, okay.
Yes. So keep that in mind for your really young ones coming in. You're probably going to ask them, oh, let's go to the sink and wash our hands, and you'll need to help them through that process. And then after they're done washing their hands, okay, let's go sit at the table.
Right.
Or let's go throw away your paper towel, and then have them do that, and then say, let's go sit at the table.
Right.
So you can preface it, like if you guys are at circle time and you're like, okay, after circle, we're going to go wash our hands, throw away a paper towel, and then go sit at the table. You're still going to have to give them reminders through that process. And then the same with like when you've identified something they're not supposed to do, having lots of reminders about those things.
Like hitting don't hit, like we're going to have to remind, right? Yeah.
Yes, so use gentle touches and
Yeah.
then giving lots of lessons on what a gentle touch looks like. And totally different subject, but positive reinforcement is much more effective than negative.
Right.
And so rephrasing the way you say things to the positive versus the negative. So rather than don't do that, explaining what they can do.
Oh,
It's much
like it.
yeah, it's
Cool.
much easier for a child to understand the things that they can do versus being told they can't do something. So you basically have to give them the replacement for the behavior.
Right.
Don't hit. Okay, well, what can I do?
Hit the hug.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
something like
Awesome.
that. So you can't do this, but you can do this.
Brilliant.
So giving them
Give them options.
the option,
Right.
the opposite positive, basically. So the action that you don't want to see, you have to give them what they should be doing instead.
Okay.
That
Cool.
makes sense.
So yeah, totally different topic, but it's all important. Okay, so after the Muneri, and just so you guys know, you will be tested on each of these mobiles, knowing the names of them and then the age range that you would typically start introducing these different mobiles.
So the Muneri is 0 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, the one in the book it says 3 to 6, but it's basically have an idea of the age range, but of course that's going to vary from child to child. The main thing is knowing which order they go in,
Okay.
and then a basic idea of the age range. So 3 to 6 weeks. The first one is the black and white Muneri. The second one is our octahedron mobile, which I did bring with me. So it's called the octahedron because
that.
these are
I love that one.
octahedrons, which are 8-sided shapes. And yeah, I love the type of paper that this was made with. It has that reflective glint to it. This one also moves very freely. And so with just a slight breeze in the classroom, they should move back and forth a little bit. So they're just very minor movements. It's nothing that's going crazy around the room. Again, we want this to be about 12 inches from the child's face. So we're only talking a foot off the ground for them. Far enough where it's out of their reach. So even if they did try to reach up and touch it, they're not going to be able to grab them. Because these are not tactile. They're not meant to be played with. They're just meant to be looked at. But you want it to be close enough to where it will definitely catch their attention and within their line of sight where they can see it. So that's about as far off the ground as you would want them to be. And then, of course, they're the primary colors. These are the first 3 colors that actually become identifiable to a child. They come in different orders, too. So typically, they'll be able to see blues and then reds and then yellows. But that could vary from child to child as well as far as what they're able to see. So this is a great one to go next. Age range on this is 5 to 8 weeks. So there's going to be overlap between when, like, the last one went to 6, where this one starts at 5.
So then that's when you would be watching.
Yeah, so.
They're ready to move on.
And sometimes they're ready to move on, like, just when they seem bored. Like, if they're not as engaged with one of the mobiles, then you'll want to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
That's usually a good indicator. But if they were never engaged with the first one, then you might want to give it longer until they start
And this is
grasping that.
called a quadrihedral.
The octahedron.
Quadrihedral? I just made that up.
Oh yeah.
Octahedron.
So octa is 8, and they're 8-sided shapes. So
Okay.
octahedron. Yeah, and there's a picture of it in the binder too, so you can study that.
Okay.
So after the octahedron, we have the goby.
I haven't actually seen this one, so I don't actually know.
Okay. So this is shading. You have to make sure that's like balanced in the middle. This one doesn't move quite as much. The individual balls move. And if there's a breeze in the classroom, then they might kind of swirl back and forth a little bit. But it's really just to introduce the concept of shading. Obviously, you're not like introducing this to the child. Again, it's just for to look at and to focus on and to explore the different shapes. There's some cool texture not physically but visually within the material, and then seeing that it gradually goes from a dark to a light shade. And you'll see these in lots of different colors. We picked the green just because it was a secondary color, and we already had the primaries, so.
It's supposed to be a healing color.
Healing?
Yeah.
Well, we picked it for that reason too.
Yeah. Perfect. It all works out.
So that one's super fun too. And this one comes next in the line. The age range on this is 7 to 10 weeks. So again, there's like that week gap, 5 to 8, 7 to 10. So all of these come very quickly. Typically, a child will work with each, or visually work with each one of them for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then you'll move on to the next one. And it's just to keep them engaged, something new, something different to explore. And then the last one, which you just referenced, are the dancers. So you can see they literally look like little people. And that one's a very free-flowing one. It's very light. And the material that it's made of looks very similar to like this. So it's very reflective material.
Silver and blue.
Yeah, silver and blue. And so, I mean, they literally look like they're little dancing pieces.
Yeah, and they like move like they're dancing
Mm-hmm.
in the breeze.
So that's the last one in the visual series.
What's that one called?
The Dancers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Easy enough.
You're like, I'll know that one. So Dancers come last, and that one really is, because it is so free moving, that one's more for tracking, because there's lots of different things to look at, and it is constantly moving. That one like cannot sit still, even if there's like no breeze in the classroom. It's just constantly. You can walk by it, and it's just like.
Yeah, I like that one.
That one's super cool. But all of them have the same concept. They're all going to be about a foot from their head. Make sure that they're out of reach, so they're not going to grab them, especially the dancers. That one can. I'm sure there's a piece on there that's already like ripped. But that one says 8 to 13 weeks.
Okay, so
So we're looking all within like the first 3 months of a child's life. They're going to be working through the visual mobiles, trading them out every 2 to 3 weeks. And so part of that does require you to track, because you're not going to have like all of your babies don't start at 6 weeks all at the same time.
Yeah,
so that's why you have to trade out who works with what when, and documenting like how long were they interested in watching it, how long were they, and every infant is different too as far as how long they're willing to sit by themselves. That you'll notice the length of time typically will increase when they're introduced to the mobiles, because they become interested in seeing what is that going to do today, how is it going to move, and that will help tremendously as they grow, because they'll be more independent and in their concentrating.
For babies that have